Hi everyone, Norman here. In this tutorial I want to show you a simple trick to go from this to this. So a bind off with a perfect slope, a perfect transition and no more stairs. Let's dive right into it. Before I show you this simple trick, I want you to understand the problem. So when you knit, say this little bar here represents one row of knit stitches, and then you turn your work around and you decide, well, let's bind off 3 stitches. As you bind off, you knit into 1 stitch and then pass over. This means a standard bind off actually adds 1 more row of knit stitches, and then you continue knitting the rest of the row. You turn around and then you add 1 more row. Then you turn around and maybe now you decide to bind off another 3 stitches. This means you add another row before you continue knitting. And you can see what's happening here. You actually added 2 more rows. So you have this flat level and this flat level, and in between there are 2 rows and a very stark step, and this is exactly what creates these steps. So to avoid this, you actually have to mellow down this steep step by slipping stitches. Here is how. The start of any slope bind off is super simple, because in the first bind off round or row, you simply bind off the regular way. So in my case, I'm going to start by binding off 3 stitches. And there's no special technique involved, just bind off 3 stitches. So that was 2, and here comes a 3rd stitch. And then you can just continue knitting across. That was everything here for the very first row. It's exactly the same over here on this side. Simply turn your project around and then bind off stitches the regular way. Again, I will bind off 3 stitches here. That's the 3rd stitch before I continue working across in pattern. So the very first pass is super simple. Now here's the trick to achieve these perfect slopes. So I'm here on the return row. These here are my first 3 bind off stitches. And now the only thing you need to remember, there's only one thing you need to remember. Here, that very last stitch of your row, don't knit it. Instead, just slip it over to your knitting needle point to point. Then turn around. And now, instead of knitting any of these stitches, instead of knitting them, just slip them over to your right needle and pass over. Make sure that you don't stretch out these stitches too much, and that's the whole trick. And then you knit the next stitch and pass over. And from here you can continue binding off however many stitches you need. Now my pattern only told me to bind off 2 stitches in this row, so I will continue knitting. Over here on this side, it's exactly the same. So you knit up until there's 1 stitch left on your knitting needle, slip that over carefully, turn around, slip these stitches, and then pass over without knitting, or purling in this case. Then I purl 1 stitch, pass this over. Again, I just need to bind off 2 stitches here, and then I continue working across. So let's show that to you One more time. Slip the last stitch, turn around, and then pass these first stitches over without knitting, and then knit one stitch, and then continue knitting. Now in the next row, my pattern tells me to only bind off one stitch. So does the repeat change? Actually it doesn't. So you just slip the last stitch, then you turn around, and just like before, you pass over without knitting, and then you continue knitting. So this will just continue your slope. So you only need to stick to the repeat, slip the last stitch, and pass the first bind off stitch over without knitting it. Same here over on this side. Again, slip the last stitch, and then pass over without purling before you continue purling. So no matter how many stitches you need to bind off, it's always the same. Slip the last stitch and then pass over without working the stitch, and then continue from the second stitch onwards, continue binding off as normal. Anyway, I hope I was able to show you how to bind off stitches with a perfect slope. Please comment below if you still have any questions, like this video, and of course subscribe to my channel. Happy knitting and enjoy the rest of your day!